Hello everyone. Welcome to the Reaper blog community hangout. As usual, OBS is struggling a bit at the start of the stream. Should clear up, but it was good at one point. These settings worked in December. I didn't change anything. I didn't update OBS even. It's all good. We'll get through it. Now YouTube's telling me it's an excellent connection. I don't know. Well, OBS is flashing red because of dropping frames. I don't know what's going on. We can start off with some Q&A. Gear Junkie 35 asks, is there a walkthrough on how to set up multiple tracks out of a reamped guitar track into several pedals at once to all be recorded back in with separate tracks? Interesting question. Do I have a walkthrough? Not exactly. Where you have your guitar recorded, split that out into separate hardware sends, each go into the pedals and then back in as a normal track in Reaper. And then you have to just figure out the offset for that. Otherwise, it's multiple reinsert plugins and you would record the output. That'll do the latency compensation for you. Recording through each thing simultaneously on separate tracks and then merging them back together in a way that works might not work. I mean, I'm thinking of like sending through a delay and a reverb and a modulation plugin or pedal separately. I don't know if that's worth doing. If practically it actually makes sense. The latency should actually be the same once you do a loopback test for one. Struggling with the routing and assignment, I want to keep each pedal track separate to not recombine. I'll load up Reaper and show you what I've got. I've got a couple hardware racks of stereo effects. Gear Junkie, I do have an email form on my website, reaper.blog. I can kind of guide you through some of it now. Let's say this is our source track. We'll add in the reinsert plugin. And I've got a few different kind of presets here. Actually, some of these are old, so they're not really useful, but I've got one for my TC electronic rack. I'm going out 8 at 7 and 8 at 8, not sending MIDI, and then returning on 7 and 8 through the 8 at. I calculated the latency a while ago, but that may be correct now as well. Usually you want the hardware on bypass when you're doing a ping test, and it came back with the same number, so that's good. If you don't see any return level, something may be wrong. That's one send, but this is coming back on the same track. I did a video on how to record, how to reamp something through reinsert back to the same track, which is a bit of a process, but there's a dedicated video for that. Instead of having, so let's say this is my TC return, and this is my Alesis return, different channels there. So I've got TC electronic fed from 7 and 8. I make a copy of that plugin and change the preset to 5 and 6. So I've got sending on 5 and 6, no MIDI, sending, returning on 5 and 6. Just gonna hit bypass on the rack and then ping detect. Yeah, the number is totally different. It's funny. And then unbypass it. You can choose your preset. We need the sends from the source track to the return track. So just drag and drop, do a unity send, drag and drop. Before we record on, right click. I'm gonna set to record output, whether it's stereo or mono. Right click on the second one, record output stereo. Set the input none for both of these. Use input none so that it's not taking it from like the mic preamp input. Is going to be coming out of the output of the reinsert plugin. They don't need to be monitor enabled. So let's just get some sort of sound file. I want a good sound for the first sound. So I'll take this washing machine door clunky. Right, so I can even make the original track not go through the master. Okay, so those are the effects, and we can just hit record. I'll stop it there. Once those are sent and done, we can turn off the sends from the original track. So that's through the TC electronic reverb. I still hear it because of the reinsert. And then the Alesis, it's like this. That's how I would set it up. If this was separate pedals, same sort of thing. You just have them on separate inputs and outputs and loop the thing through, setting the track to no input, record output, either mono or stereo. You don't need to monitor enable it. Everything is coming through the reinsert plugin. After you print through, you just want to bypass this plugin, bypass any sends, things like that. Hopefully that makes sense. We had a really good stream in December. Had an okay stream last week. Trying to make this a trend. Trying to get like 50 streams this year, because I always get to the end of the month and I'm writing my newsletter and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't stream at all last week. Like 30 days went by and I didn't, or last month, and whole month I didn't stream. So easy to just get started on a stream, but I don't know, it's still scary. Hi, can you stop all plugins on startup as it's taking a long time? Cheers. Yes, you can. What we're looking for here is in preferences, and then under VST is this option, scan new updated plugins on startup. You can uncheck that and it won't look for new plugins. If it's taking a long time, I would say just let it take a long time. Just get through it once, and then all your stuff will be found, and each startup is shorter. When it is taking a long time, there should be a cancel button that comes up. So if it takes longer than like 3 seconds, there should be a cancel button there. Peter asks, when can we expect XTouch with CSI video? It's gonna be a while, unfortunately. CSI is such a big topic. One of the things with CSI is it comes with a pretty decent XTouch configuration, but it's not the way that I like to use it. So basically I need to immediately start customizing it. And actually, in a way, I've covered this before. The day that I got the XTouch, I did a live stream. I opened the box, plugged it in, and then started streaming. And I started out with CSI there. So if you want to go back to that video, it must have been probably September I did that. There's some information there, but it's not very in-depth. But otherwise, what's taking so long is I haven't used it for about a month because of Christmas and stuff. We came up with the idea of doing a chart of all the features so that we can visually compare and sort of rank things for the XTouch with all the different drivers that are available. Like there's the built-in stuff with Reaper, then there's driven by Moss, Clink, CSI, Smart Knobs. Is that all? I might be missing one. Relearn? So next is Relearn. And I've forgotten everything I know about it over the past month. So I'm basically starting over on that one. It has a Mackie control setup, but it's not complete. And so I need to cover what it does out of the box, essentially. Like when you activate that preset, what do you get and what are you missing? And then how to implement those missing features. It's only a day of work. I can do it. It's just one of those things that seems like infinitely impossible, or an infinite amount of work until I actually get started on it. Like the Clink video, that was half a day to do. The Driven by Moss one was like half a day to record, and like one session, one take, maybe 2 hours of recording at the most. And in the end, it was very easy. but it was weeks of reading, trying things out before I got to that point. And I don't feel like I'm at that point with relearn yet. It's going to take me a while. So I've got relearn and CSI and smart knobs to cover. Best way to use sends on drums. Individual tracks to group, and from group to send effects, or individual tracks to sends to effects. Yeah, good question. All right, so each of these drum sounds are coming out a different track. And there's bleed, but the main mic should only be coming out of one track. You can see here. All right, and then in the mixer, we've got the option of adding any effects that we want. So I'll just add a couple tracks. And let's say a verb and a delay. So let's say we take the snare top and send it to the reverb. And then we also have bus effects, like this EQ. Let's say the main drums have like no bass. When we're doing it like this, where we got a parallel send going outside of the group, this send to the reverb track, which I didn't put the reverb in, but reverb track is getting the full signal from that snare track. And it's not affected by the EQ or whatever effects are on the group track, the folder. So if I solo this reverb, turn the mix down here, this is the original snare sound, right? But if I solo this snare, it's very thin because I put that aggressive reverb on, or EQ on it. So what's the solution here? Let's say you want the reverb to be affected by that EQ on the bus. You bring the reverb track into your group or into your folder. And so now when I solo the snare top and have that reverb active, the reverb also gets that filtering. This may not be the best way, but if you want that, the tonal changes on the group to be applied to the effects as well, that's how you do it. 90% of the mixes I do, I just keep this other way because I've got my other effects in a group, their own group. It all kind of mixes together at the master. You make it work anyways. You're going to change the mix to make it work as you're doing it. In my opinion, the technically correct way is to put the reverb track in your drum bus, but it may not be the most intuitive way, the fastest way to work, the most efficient way to work, or probably the better way to do it if you have the resources to run multiple reverbs. But if you want one reverb to be shared with your drums, your guitars, your bass, your keys, all that stuff, then have it separate. You're kind of just creating its own reverb for the thing, especially if your drum bus is drastically changing the sound of the drums as a whole. I have some crashy 64-bit VST2 plugins. Reaper has no sandboxing, right? Actually, it does. So if we go to the, if we take a plugin, we right-click, go to compatibility settings. Where is it? No, not that one. It's run as. So we've got automatic, separate, dedicated process, and native only. I forget how to explain this. Dedicated basically makes it separate from Reaper. If it crashes, only that plugin crashes. Separate is like within Reaper, but if it crashes, I think it's a little more stable, but it can still crash Reaper as a whole. They're very similar features or options. And there's also this buggy plugin compatibility mode, which you shouldn't really need. But those are your options. You're essentially bridging, firewalling those plugins. When using analog via cloud, Reaper's compensation actually overcompensates naturally, so the print ends up ahead rather than behind by quite a bit. I don't know what you mean by analog via cloud. Compensation often ends up being ahead. Any like printing that you do is impacted by your settings for recording. So we've got this audio driver reported latency and the manual input offset and stuff like that. If you're recording out of a plugin, this is still applying. Pretty sure. Try setting that to 0, or if you know by how much it's off, then you put in the negative amount and it should print normally. One asks, Reaper 7 coming soon? Probably not. It's going to be a while, I think. Usually one of the big changes is a new theme, and I haven't seen or heard anything about a new theme. When Reaper 6 came out, I had been using the Reaper 6 theme for private testing for probably 8 months. So, gonna be a while. Have you gotten Reaper audio loopback to be sample accurate? I have given up on hardware parallel processing, even with reinsert pinging. It's always off, sometimes by less than a sample. Yeah, I mean, it used to be bad. I would say that it's good now. You can, maybe it depends on your sample rate. The higher the sample rate, the better it's gonna be. Maybe that's a benefit of switching to like 88.2 or 96K. At 48K, I have had it be sample accurate. It used to be much worse, and I complained about it. And then Justin replied on the forum and said, yeah, we probably can't do that. And then the next day, it's like, okay, try it now. And I was able to do parallel compression without any phase issues. You might want to try doing the ping with just a cable through, not going through any effects first, and see how that works. Is there a script or action that allows for comments on individual tracks in the mixer? Also, will you be doing a revamp of how to optimize Reaper settings for the best performance? I probably won't do another video on that. Comments on individual tracks in the mixer? I don't think so. I don't think there is. One thing you can do, you can put in an empty plugin and rename it. That's one way to do a note. Each effects can have a note box on it. There is the SWS track notes function. Actually, I haven't used this before, but it seems to follow the select a track. So if I, all right, so if I got notes on track 2 and I select track 1, there's a different set. So bass, let's say P bass and Ampeg, SVT, classic, and 8x10 with SM7. So yeah, you can see notes there, and then this can be docked. Well, that doesn't really work. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Wrap text. You can kind of do that. I would say this is not working very well. That needs to be redone. There is Hada Track Inspector, and in here, I believe there is a comment section. There's this text and image notepad. But yeah, if you just want a little comment box that goes there, you're not going to find it, unfortunately. Do you have a video on copying, pasting automation points? If I automated the volume of my snare to get rid of a bleed, could you copy and paste that information and paste it to other hits? Yeah, I would do that using Razor edits these days. You could do it with automation items, but I think a Razor edit would be the simplest way. Let's say you've got some automation like that. I'm going to Alt right drag to create a Razor edit. And then your copy action should be Command C. Mine is just C, and then paste. And you can paste that a bunch of times as needed. Funny thing is, these didn't all paste exactly the same. I think when you repeat them like that, it will mess with the envelope data a little bit. Maybe that's a bug. But yeah, essentially that. I was doing that with Snap to Grid on, but you could just do that. copy them wherever you want, hit paste. That's razor edits. And the other option is there's a little gray line right below. You can draw in that box, and then this becomes movable. You can select it, copy, paste, and then you can move these as items. These are called automation items. There's also an option to copy and pool, where this is actually the same item. So if I move one, they move together because it is essentially a clone of the same item. They move independently in time. They can even be dragged to other tracks, I believe. Is that right? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you can even move them to other tracks. And they're independent time, but linked kind of values. Two easy ways to do that. And then there's selecting by time selection, making sure that the points are selected and then copy and paste. So really want exclusive arm recording when clicking the record button on a track. Exclusive arm recording. Yeah, you've probably seen this option, automatically record arm when track's selected. That's the closest we've got right now, but if something is automatically record armed, so I'll manually record arm, and then this one I'll set to automatic. It's not going to disable the manually record armed track. And once you set that, if you make a new track, is that, no, it's not. I was going to say make a new track that's going to be there by default, but that's untrue. I think there is actually a way. You can alt click. I should have said that first. Going back to the notes thing, I feel like a notes section is more useful than an icon. And just having a little text box that like word wraps and is useful, that'd be great to have. I did something like that on accident in the MIDI editor where the penciled notes would be cloned on the corresponding bar. Sound familiar? That just sounds like it's a looped item. I'll show you what that looks like. So I've got an item here, and then I use this setting for looping, loop item source, and then repeat it. And then if I put in a note here, you see that it's repeating in the editor, all the changes here. Then there's also pooled MIDI items. So like if I make a regular copy of this, changes to this one aren't going to affect the next one. Okay, there's a couple options here. Paste items, tracks creating pooled ghost MIDI items and automation items regardless of preference, or a toggle for turning on pooled ghosts when copying. Copy, paste, nope, copy, use this item to paste. And now there's a new icon on those items. If I modify one, you see it happens to both. How do you set up those colorful grid lines? Okay, that's a good question. So as you see here, I've got some colorful grid lines. It's on one. I mean, sometimes it gets a little muddy on stream and stuff, but I've got like a pink and a blue and like a light pink for in between. Theme development, show theme tweak configuration window. Then in here, you want to search for grid. And then you've got grid lines for start of measure, the grid lines for start of beats, and in between beats. And you can repeat that for the MIDI editor as well. You can also change kind of the intensity of those grid lines. Have I ever sidechained with Kiloheart's Snapheap and Reaper? I don't know if I have. All right, so we need 2 tracks, and let's put Snapheap on track 2. This has auxiliary inputs, so that's good. We know that it's possible. For a modulator, we need to have something that can receive from external source. So there's audio follower, and then where it says main, we want to make that external. And now let's get some sort of sound source. Insert quick source. And then we want to drag from the routing button of the sending track into the plugin. And then let's just put that at Unity. And you can see that input coming in there. Now let's apply that to frequency shifter, and then you want it turned up. Yeah, I kind of forget how this works, but it's working. You can see the frequency shifter is moving there whenever it receives that pulse. Question about MIDI export. If you have a track with 10 MIDI items on it, every item has a different drum pattern. When using export project MIDI, cannot export single items. Workaround is to name the track, name items, convert active. You know, if it's a MIDI item, I would actually do it a different way. Maybe a little, I don't know if there's a way to automate it, but I added a button to my MIDI toolbar. Let's just add in, so I added in some notes here. I've got this button, file export contents as .mid. That'll bring up a dialog to save that. But you'll have to repeat that process, give it a name and stuff for every file. I don't think there's really any batch functions for rendering MIDI, because the export project MIDI, you can do selected items. There's no wildcards in here, and I don't know if it keeps the name and stuff. When using export project MIDI, you can't export single items. You should be able to with this option. Oh, is this saying consolidate? Huh. You want it to like export selected, not consolidate. There should be a non-multi-track individual item render, or not render, but export function. I think with your method and then batch renaming outside of Reaper, it's probably the way to go. There are also actions to bulk rename file items or takes. Is it hard to make frames on buttons? Not really. If you just want to add frames to buttons, basically you need a custom theme. So that's going to be somewhat difficult. So you need to extract the theme that you're starting from. So you take one of these Reaper theme zips, rename it to Reaper theme.zip, and then extract. It'll make a folder like you'll have a Reaper theme file and a folder inside. And then inside the folder, it's going to be a toolbar blank.png, I think. Toolbar blank is my file with the border. So you find toolbar blank, edit it to add a 1 pixel frame, and then render that. And you want to do that in multiple sizes as well. So this actual project looks like this. You don't really see that detail when it's in the thing, but that's what it looks like. There is 3 modes for toolbar buttons. So there's the default like off position. Then there's the hover position, so it's just slightly tinted kind of. Some opacity change, yeah. And then you've got your on mode. This is overlaid on top of all of the other toolbar buttons, which, I mean, honestly, it's kind of a mess. In my opinion, it's kind of a mess. But I also don't like that the toolbar buttons kind of blend into the background and don't look like buttons if there's not a frame. And some of the stock main menu toolbar buttons don't have borders because they have their own icons that override it. Is there any way to have Reaper record with the same latency I hear when software monitoring instead of Reaper trying to adjust for driver latency through a bus perhaps? This came up earlier in the stream. There is the audio reported driver latency and the manual offsets. I suppose if you had that turned off, then Reaper is not going to offset the input. Then there's also if you right click on a record arm button. I swear I just saw this. There is the option for output, record output, latency compensated or not. I don't know if that's really going to solve that, but I'm pretty sure there's this option. I think it's that. I think you might not like it. I don't know of anyone that turns that off. Use the driver reported latency, but actually measure the difference, like by taking a cable, let's say out of output 3 into input 3. You can use the reinsert plugin to calculate that, or record a ping, like a single sample click from out of the track through that loop. Make sure you're not monitoring it as you record it, and you can find that offset. So when I did it last time, it was 65 samples. I don't know if that's right now. And it's going to depend on your sample rate and your buffer size to some extent. Yeah, give it a try. I'm not sure if I've ever used it turned off, because usually it's a few, like 100 samples. That's the offset without that. Chris said, watch your fresh start vids finally. Great stuff. Much of which I also prefer as my settings, some are not. Yeah, hopefully, I mean, that's just the settings that I use and set up for people, but it's always like they're just preferences and they don't have to be the same as mine. That's why they're preferences. But I just want to like call attention to all those little things that drastically change the experience. Find a way to lock the track numbers or to let new tracks get higher numbers even when added between existing ones. You can map MIDI CC to track volume. But it's not ideal if the order of the tracks change. I don't think there is a way to lock the track numbers. The thing with mapping CC to track volume, you really want to use a control surface mode for that, like an X-Touch, using MCU, using CSI, using relearn, any of those. And then it's just based on like banks of 8 tracks. Yeah, it's always going to follow your track selection, and it's just going to be 8 tracks from where you are in the selected tracks of the project, rather than explicitly this fader always controls track number 3. Control surface modes is the way to do that properly. Is it possible to have tracks from project outputs? Like record the output of a track? Yep, there's record output mode. Right click on a track, and you can set the record output stereo or record output multi-channel, and set input to none usually. If this is a folder track, it will record everything that's coming into the folder track. If you mean record the output of like what you hear from Reaper, like Reaper's master into its own track, you'd need a loopback tool. I've got loopback enabled in the main outputs here. Loopback 1, 2, and then you would take a track, set its input to loopback 1, 2. Make sure that this is not going to the master, or that's going to make a feedback loop. That loopback function, I talked about it in a video, a changelog video. How to resize the opening of the effects window. I've got this setting here, automatically resize effects windows up and down. They might be off by default. When I've got a plugin here that's this size and I add in another plugin like a redelay that's smaller, it resizes the effects window automatically. But if those settings are off and I switch to re-EQ, it's going to shrink down to the smaller size. Or if I make this one bigger and switch over to redelay, the frame's going to be the same size still. I definitely prefer these on. Maybe that's it. Maybe that solves the problem. What would be your biggest warning to your younger self about DAWs in general? Most of my advice to younger self would be like, sleep better, eat better, start exercising. I feel like I got into Reaper at the right time because I had tried it several times before, for probably a year. It took me before I was able to complete a project in Reaper. I had no idea that I would be doing this years later. Or maybe my advice would be, you have ADHD. Maybe avoid Reaper, because Reaper is not a good DAW for people with ADHD, maybe. Reaper is either the best or the worst DAW for people with ADHD, because I feel like it enables us. It's so easy to get distracted by some like tedious thing that we're doing in Reaper. And then we go on this rabbit hole of solving that problem, spending hours creating custom actions, scripts, cycle actions, researching things like that to solve some problem that probably would have only taken us 10 minutes at the most to just power through and do it slowly. So yeah, spending 4 hours creating a script that solves a 5-second problem that's often what happens with Reaper. We solve a problem for later by building that. I turn that into content. I can make a video about it. I can get some money from that. Often I don't end up using that tool that I just created again. Sometimes I do. Sometimes it ends up being something that I use all day, every day. But often it's not. Often it's completely pointless. One example, the set of actions that I created in the cycle action editor for checkerboarding audio. I was editing dialogue for a short film, or mixing a short film. The audio came to me as consolidated waves, but the order of the tracks, or the order of the actors and everything, was constantly changing. So I had multiple mics for the actors. There's like a boom mic and a lav mic. So I would just create a template of tracks called like DX1 through DX10. So I just set it up so there's 10 tracks. I would be able to highlight an area in the track like source. I would split the items, copy the items, color it to show that it was used, go to the start of the time selection, select another track called SDX2. DX2 is what I mean to say. Dialog 2, and then paste it. And so coming up with this workflow made it easier, but I've never needed it since. So I probably spent over an hour building this workflow, another 2 hours making a video about it, but I've never needed it again. Maybe somebody else has used that workflow again, but probably not. The Bun says, I've come across quite a few folks that find Reaper overwhelming. I don't understand why. As far as basic recording and mixing go, it's very minimal and all right in front of you. Yeah, it kind of depends on what you're used to. I understand both sides of it. It's overwhelming, all the possibilities, the stuff that's in the menus. Like, compare it to GarageBand or any like iPad app. There is just maybe a lot of visual clutter, a lot of options. Like once you get into SWS and repack scripts, like just everything, there's so many options, and there's 5 or 6 ways to do a lot of different things, a lot of basic things, and everyone's got different workflows. And then if they're coming from another DAW, they might have some sort of workflow they'd like to replicate. And if things are different, then I'm like, I'll just go back to Pro Tools or whatever. It took me probably a year to get going with Reaper. It was Kenny's first videos that helped him most, as well as some videos from Adam Wathan. But this is like 2000, maybe 2008, maybe 2009 back then. There was no blog back then. There wasn't really a lot of documentation other than some community members that are still around today. The Reaper user guide was very helpful. There was some videos here and there, but not many people making videos at the time. I think the little puzzles that Reaper can allow us to indulge ourselves in and solve problems, it's good and bad. Some days I wish it was just easier, or I wish I didn't have the problems to solve. I could just focus on the things. But being able to create your own workflow is super nice as well. I hate being like kind of closed off in this toolbox that is missing things, that sort of thing. The bun question to the community. How many folks make their own reverb impulses, and are there any tips for best results? I have. I think I did 2 videos on it. If you mean impulse responses through hardware, I think it all still applies. Create a source sound using Reaper, just like a couple samples, maybe a millisecond long, and then send it through the hardware and trim out the silence. Then drop that into your player, your reverb impulse response player. I've done it with my Space Echo, taken just a noise burst and shrunk that down to like a few samples, and that works kind of as an EQ. Yeah, just experiment with like different lengths, and where you trim it can make a difference. There's a question from a couple people about Reaper 7. I don't know when that's coming. It's probably a long ways off. As far as changes that will include, really no ideas. To me, Reaper feels very complete. I could definitely keep working with it the way it is right now. I love that the community is able to like build so many features themselves. Sometimes those get integrated into Reaper natively, but I don't think they really have to. SWS is getting an update pretty soon, but I think there's a bunch of things in that that are very old and ought to be rebuilt rather than just bug fixes. They haven't put anything like brand new into that in a really long time. I was watching Tantacruel's video about the Muse Score redesign. Because it's an open source app, they've got their whole like backend library stuff for the UI available. Reaper 7 could use that and drastically change the appearance. And I think that might be worth doing. This one, how we made MuseScore 4 music app design is painful or something like that. Good video. Most of his videos are good. I think that the magical right click of Reaper is perhaps something that is a barrier to a lot of folks. It's not something that is evident right out of the gate. I think you can easily learn to expect there to be something like more options when you right click. In other apps, I'm surprised when there isn't. I feel like the right drag is the harder one to learn because I've never seen right drag used anywhere else. And it's a shame because it's super useful. It's a totally unused gesture in computers. Be interested to know which other apps actually use a right drag. But learning that one is kind of critical for using Reaper. I've been using the ReaLimit a fair amount. The way that I want to use it is a little outside of what it's designed for, I think. So using it as like a master limiter works fine most of the time, or you want it to be loud, but sometimes you want to limit the peaks, but not to 0. You want to limit to -12 and then raise up the overall level. And you want to do that independently. Basically, all I'm saying is that it needs a separate volume adjustment after the limiting. So I want to be able to set the ceiling and then raise the output level separate. It never works intuitively for me thinking about it that way. But if it's just making a mix louder, yeah, it's fine. I use ReaLimit, or I'll use Ozone, or the IK Multimedia Stealth Limiter. Those are like the three that I use mainly. Or Sausage Fattener. Is it possible to render and place a MIDI item into an audio item? Yes, multiple ways. So we take a MIDI item, right-click it, render items as new take. There's also apply track effects as a new take, mono output. It depends where your instrument is. You can put the synth onto the item, and then you can even glue it, and that will do it. A few different ways. You can freeze, you can create a sub-project. Over the holidays, I bought some plugin. What plugin was it? What did I buy? Oh yeah, I bought XO from XO1 Audio. And I got this for free. And it's a weird one. It's just hard for me to like figure out kind of the signal flow. So there's 3 oscillators, a filter, MIDI control, there's a noise source, and I'm assuming that this is like a semi-modular synth, right? Orange boxes show the default input. Okay, my eyes glaze over. I don't actually take in the information in front of me with this plugin. Like after just going through some presets and stuff, I just don't think it's a synth that's like for me. Maybe it's just the UI. The things that move don't really stand out to me. Where's the mixer? Mixer's here. VCA amount, distortion amount, delay amount. Okay. VCA. And that one's just going all the time. Okay, so this is after the VCA. Where is the reverb coming from? Okay, so this is on. Okay, if I turn this down and turn this up. Okay, starting to make sense. I don't think there's anything for sequencing built into this, right? Yeah, I don't really know Sherry Audio stuff at all. I did a video about the Surrealistic MG1. As weird as it is, it's not an unlimited amount of features. This is a lot to take in. Okay, so if I want the filter to move over time, what the hell am I looking for? Cutoff frequency, low pass. What makes the filter move? Do I need to drag from the envelope generator to... No? Are these inputs? Do I need to drag something into the voltage processors first? I think so. Okay, we'll do this another time. Because, yeah. I should at least look at a manual or something. I don't find this to be intuitive. And I don't have time for it right now. XO, on the other hand, that's intuitive. Yeah, I know. It's like one of the most famous synths from 70s, I want to say, where it was going from like scientific equipment into music. It's a bit overwhelming, for sure. You guys tried out XO? That's pretty cool. So let's say I like this one and I want to change the presets a bit. So I can completely change the kit, but keeping the same pattern. I love this kind of thing. I wish Reaper had some sort of sequencer like this, because it's just so fucking good. Did you guys ever play with that app on or the iOS app from Propeller Propeller Heads, makers of Reason? I forget what it was called. Wasn't Record, it was something. I might still have it somewhere, but I think they sold that app. But it had a Euclidean sequencer thing. And it was great. Really quick way to come up with patterns and stuff. Something I wanted to check out today, I just remembered. There's a JS plugin, like, what's it called? SEQS, glitch sequencer thing. So this is a free plugin for Reaper. You can get it through Repack. This is my very first time playing with it. I'll just put in things randomly. Are there settings for each one? Yes, there are. Okay. Kind of like Looperator. It's kind of like Effectrix or like Glitch 2. Is that what it's called? Kind of like this. Honestly, it looks very similar. It's like Infiltrator. Gross Beat, I think, is also similar to this. This is powerful. It needs some presets for sure, because there's a little too much to do to get going with it. I think someone just needs to make a bank of presets. Am I going to do it? I don't know. But just some starting points would be great. Oh, there's even filter types. That's cool. Now, is the filter on all the time now? Seems to be. Why is the filter on all the time? Fun. Will Reaper allow you to apply effect in the automation lane on this? What do we got for automation? It's quite a lot of parameters there. Mostly enable and disable, actually. And a couple things like filter type. Do a bunch of it. And then is there also patterns? I don't know how many patterns there are. 64 patterns? 65 patterns? What it's missing is presets right now, I'd say. Okay, hit the randomize button, then tap on one of the effect names. That's cool. So it looks like you can have it freely running, triggered by MIDI or following the host project. Time beats 65 presets. This is sequence length up to 32. This is speed. Chris, have you been using this before? I saw someone post a link to it on Twitter, and then realized I probably already had it installed and never looked at it until now. I don't know what's going on. Okay, I figured out the modulator. Okay, I figured out the filter thing. There's a little toggle to bypass the filter when there's no blocks. And that's kind of what I expected to happen, but I didn't know that that was there. I thought that would be on by default. This has a very decent amount of polish for a free JS effect. Super cool. Stuff like this wasn't possible only a few years ago. If you're just joining us and you miss what this is, we got exo drums. That's the pattern. And then we got this thing. EXO is very cool. Highly recommend it. It doesn't completely replace all the features that Geist 2 has, and that's what I wanted to replace. But I don't really use, or I didn't really use a lot of the features. Like that was as complete as a DAW because it has audio recording, sampling. It has 8 complete engines where it's an entirely new, basically a new instance of the plugin. It has snapshots. It has a live mode. It has a full mixer with a dozen effects. EXO does the constellation thing really well. The alternative to this is Atlas, but it ended up being only like a difference of $10 or something. F Expansion Geist too. Yeah. They haven't officially discontinued it, but they haven't developed it since like 2018. So basically dead. Jason, I don't think it actually follows the path. I think this is just showing a history of where you've been on the sounds. They're already arranged in here kind of by similarity, and you can jump through this way. And then there is a history thing here. So these are mostly built-in sounds that I have here. I can't remember if I added anything else. I added just a couple libraries. 300 or so sounds. Did I buy this when it was on sale? Yeah, Black Friday. I demoed this in Atlas. I do like both. This just sort of has more polish, and it was like basically the same price. I think it ended up being a bit cheaper than Atlas with the discounts from Plugin Boutique. So it was on sale, plus I had some other discount. If you want to check it out, you can go to reaperblog.net/pluginboutique or reaper.blog/pluginboutique, and it should put in my link for you, so it'll support the channel. Currently $129. EXO definitely has some cool stuff. Doesn't do everything. You know, you're limited to the, what is it, like 9 drums, but it's very quick to change those drums where it would be like menu diving in other apps. I like Speed Drum, but it's a little slow for adding, like changing the sounds, and there's no sequencer. We'll get the drum machine VST from Arturia. What is the drum machine from Arturia? Spark? Arturia Spark? I don't know if I would recommend that one, actually. I never hear people talking about it. You can get all these sample packs. Like if you want the sounds, go on reverb.com. They've got a free bundle of all of this stuff. The Spark and the Spark LE like hardware came out a really long time ago at this point. I know it's here somewhere. Reverb Drum Machines, the complete collection. You get a modded 707, a 606, Oberheim DX, 808, 909, modded 909. I haven't downloaded this because it's too similar to stuff that I already have. But yeah, over 50 drum machines. The main thing you need then is a good sampler to organize it into patches. I was considering getting the TR8S. Not this one. Well, maybe this one. There's a little one that I was considering. You don't want anything too tiny. I think these ones kind of would feel like toys because everything's miniature. And that one's not expandable, but there's some other one. It's like a miniature version of this, like a half-size version of this, but you can load your own samples. I mean, this is probably the one I'll get because I'm just a sucker for the Korg stuff. This one, the 6S, I guess it is. This is what I'm considering getting. It's compact, and I'm pretty sure you can load your own samples. It has 808, 909, 707, and 606 sounds. And it has some effects built in. Functions as a audio and MIDI interface. Support for custom user samples. Whether you're using Reaper or not, this seems like a pretty cool thing to have. A bit pricey, maybe. Oh, that one's pretty cool too. Oh, that's cheap. Oh, this is interesting. So this is drums and 303 bass. Where are the audio outs? Maybe they're on the top. Audio outs. Yeah. Then there's things like this, which are a lot more advanced. But you're just kind of looking for like classic drum sounds and like a quick way to input notes into it. I like the look of those other ones. It's cool that Roland has finally made plugins of their classic stuff. Like, honestly, like 12 years too late, maybe more. And everyone just stole their sounds anyways, but I don't know. The sound of the 808, 707, 606 and stuff like that, it's always going to be useful stuff. Always useful. Roland Cloud was so late to the game. I would have loved to have that stuff back mid-2000s. I would have happily paid the subscription price, but now I've got like 50 options for those things. Thank you guys for joining me for the stream. A lot of you have been here since the beginning. Thank you so much. Thank you for making me part of your day. Watching me out of everything on the internet, that's feels amazing. See you guys later. I don't have a button to end the stream. All right.